we could do like air hockey. Boom. It doesn't slide well. These weren't made for glass tables, I suppose.
No,
We are live.
So we're for real live?
we're for real live
like
now?
YouTube live.
Hey, yeah, we are. Okay, cool. Let me, yeah, there we go.
We're kind of live.
We're kind of live.
This is so bad. Does that mean we're on a ventilator right now?
There we go.
Okay. All right, moved it on over. All right, guys, sorry for that interruption there. We actually went live on a different channel, so for everybody that's in here right now, we're going to continue on the conversation. I'll give you a little bit of a breakdown. We started talking about traveling with multiply gear and how I had an incident where I almost lost a bag. Thanks, Delta. Awesome. And we were just talking about how I'm starting to transition for a multiply meet, and Dave was talking about the skills and sort of the direction of how to get somebody involved in learning a new skill or learning multiply lifting. So after you, Dave.
So the question is, how do you bring somebody into multiply? Where I kind of backtracked the question and said it's no different than bringing somebody into any other skill set.
Yep. That
not that powerlifting doesn't have a skill set just raw. There is the specificity of those lifts. But when you're dealing with gear, the best way to think about that is it's a different sport, right? So then there's more specificity because you need to learn the gear and all the others, and it has to be factored in. Where's it go? Where's it not go? And there's so many variables with the whole thing, which that's why I want to kind of dial back and talk about how to kind of reframe some of the programming stuff that we've spoken about in previous podcasts. Because I don't think I'm really explaining what I'm trying to explain when I use words like auto-regulation, because then you're thinking, well, how do I know how to auto-regulate? That's why I'm asking for help.
Right.
I don't know how to auto-regulate. So it's not really auto-regulation when you're having somebody help. So there's a program. So I really don't even know how to launch into the conversation, but say here's a 12-week program that you get. That program is essentially closed. Somebody wrote the program, put their skill set or not, into the program, but let's just assume it's a good program.
Yep.
All right. So that's like a computer program. That's a wireframe system.
Yeah.
That's
like a start and a stop.
Yes. That system goes from person A here. This is your 12-week program. Person B. That's closed. Right. So that closed system can also be online training apps, right, or AI apps, if that's what they want to call them, or whatever it's going to be. They're also closed. Might be a little bit more open because there's going to be feedback loops. How do you feel today? How do you not feel today? But still, that still is closed.
Yeah.
Right. And by saying closed, what I'm saying is you can't take this 12-week program and combine it with another 12-week program.
Right.
Two closed systems can't communicate, right? So you have this closed system, which is only going to be able to do so much.
Yeah, there's no variability there.
There's no variability. And whenever the validation of all this is, if you ask anybody who's a coach, trainer, or they just love the sport, they've only been in it a couple years, and they haven't been in it that long, how many sets do I need for a smaller body part? 8 to 12. How many you need for a big? They got definitive answers.
Yep.
Now ask somebody that's been doing it for a long period of time, that's more experienced, been around, or even more educated, however you want to define the experience. And what's the answer? Always. It depends.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, so that's the validation that a closed system is essentially, it's a closed system. It's only got so much value. So if you have your little app that you're using and it's asking the questions and it's making the adjustments as you go through, it's only asking the questions that it knows to ask.
Right.
It doesn't know how to ask the follow-up questions. That's assuming that the questions are all going to be the same. It's closed. Yep. I'm not saying good or bad. I'm just saying it's closed. Now, on the other end, you have an open system, right? So an app can't communicate with another app to give this app a solution. They can sync.
Right.
but it's not, they
just
can't
to showcase the
drill
data
down.
off of one app into another app, but it's not actually communicating. Yeah.
So now when you have an open system, then all those it depends become part of all the decision-making processes. The way that I kind of help people out here is so open, it's ridiculous. So there's a general flow of how it is on the long term, but then because everything depends. So that's where, we get questions like, well, what do you think of this program? 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 They're all closed programs. They're only good for so much. Now say you have that 12-week program, and then you hire that coach, and that coach feeds you each week of that program each week, which is a little more open, and that's what you're paying a little bit more for.
Right. Because
there is that. But then that communication still essentially becomes a closed loop, because the coach only has so much time. They don't know every question to ask, because they're not seeing the entire training session. They only know the questions to ask that are relative to that. So an example of what I'm talking about is I track my sleep, and I use the Apple Watch type of thing, and it's got all these different metrics. The first thing I have to answer before I see the metrics is, how do you think you slept? Did you sleep like shit? Did you sleep average? Did you sleep great?
Yep.
You know what my answer is every fucking time? The middle one.
I was going to say the rate.
Yeah, I'm not going to say, no, I slept like shit because I got up.
Yeah, right.
And granted, that's only 3 choices, and that's probably the best way to do it.
Yeah.
But how do I validate in my own head, was that good? You haven't showed me the metrics yet. Right. So I'm like, well, I don't know the metrics, so I don't know if it's good or bad. You're asking me before I can see the metrics. I just got the fuck up. I don't know. Right. And it's still better, but let's think of this as a training, broad training system. That's one component of rest, based upon metrics that may not even be that good for all we know, but it's better than nothing. That's just one thing. So I'm not saying technology is bad, I'm saying technology is good. Because now if you have that as an indicator to be able to help track what's good, bad, poor, how many hours, then you can start figuring out in your head, and a computer could figure out all these metrics. So then you put that in there, you have heart rate variability, you start adding all these other things that these closed systems can essentially do with technology as they become more open. Then it becomes this bigger, wider picture that programming, computer programming, AI, whatever you want to call it, and I don't think the fitness industry is there, right, can start using all that data to be able to answer a lot of the questions that a normal coach would be able to answer. But they can't ask the follow-up question.
Right. There's not that level of nuance isn't there.
Yes, right. So that's why I don't think any AI program, or that's why the best program's never been written.
You're right.
It's been going on for how long? The best programs have never been written. There have been some really good ones, and if you look at some commonalities of the really good ones, it's variability. Variability as in how? Okay, well, here's an AMRAP. Well, okay, good. We can make fun of the AMRAPs. What that's really doing is saying, do maximum number of reps. It could be 5 for you, it could be 15 for the other one, but you're
making sure you get to a certain point, regardless of what
based upon what, though? Your variability of how you feel within that set.
Absolutely.
Right? So that's where it comes back to that auto-regulation, is when can you start trying to ask yourself all those different questions to be able to determine this. When you're taking somebody through a generalized training program, say powerlifting, well, getting back to the question you're talking about, there's certain things that have to be done. You're basically on a conjugate thing. So there's speed work, there's max effort. There's some big chunks that need to be done. Those need to be waived, and there's multiple different ways to waive that. But what's the best way to waive that based upon how somebody looks, feels, and says? Right. So you have a template, to basically follow, to be able to say, here's the 3 divisions of exercises: main exercise, accessory, supplemental exercises. Here's where I'd like that to be, but it's 100% subjective based upon, are they going to be here? If they're not going to be here, okay, cool. We're going to work around that. But if they're not going to be here, where are they going to be? What are they going to be doing? Is it going to be R&R? Because that means that we can change something later in the week, right, to be able to bump it up a little bit more. It doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It just means there's a pivot thing to where you don't want to stick with that. Right. So that variability, or that openness, which is I'm going to say it's impossible to do unless you're seeing somebody train every single time they're training,
Right.
or most of the time, and then have backup systems even for that. You know, who do they know? Who are they working out with when you're not around? It's not like you need laser focus on any of this shit, you know, either. Open dialogue can help. You know, we're actually talking about how we can create a service through us to be able to help create a vastly open system of training of people, right? The only problem we're running into as we discuss this is scalability.
Oh, for sure.
You know, so that's the problem. But creating it's not going to be that hard of a problem. It's just the scalability and the value and compensation, stuff like that. But it's doable, but it's going to be a lot more work than what people think it's going to be, because it's not, here's program A.
Yeah, because it's not something that's currently being utilized in the space as it is.
Yes. So now with the multiply variable, this is where, and this is probably how a lot of this got rooted, you know, through how the lens that I look at these things, is to really learn the gear, you're going to need to be training with weights that are 90% or above.
That's been the biggest fucking thing to have to deal with.
Yeah. So now we all know you can't train 90% and above all the time. Arguably, yes, you can. If it's a max effort method, you're changing the exercises, but you're changing movement patterns quite a bit.
Right.
And you're still having days to pull back and so forth. But let's assume that's true. And then all the gear work's just going to be on the max effort day. Well, then your ability to teach somebody to strain under longer periods of time is going to be compromised.
Yep.
You know, because of that. So it just becomes lifting greater weights in the gear in a movement pattern that they're not going to use when they go to compete.
Right.
So now you have these conflicting interests. You have to be able to have this 90% and above, do so with the right movement pattern, but not break somebody down to the point they can't compete, because they're going to get broken down. You know, it's just how fast and when.
Right.
Optimally, you want to break down like the week after the meet, so it really doesn't happen. It's just you go there, that's it, and then they recover, and it doesn't become this factor. So with the gear, if you're trying to learn the gear, there's other variables. I'm not getting it to fit what it's supposed to feel like. You don't know. There's all those factors, which my cop-out answer to that is just find somebody that knows what they're doing. You know,
for sure.
Just help with that, because there's so many. There's less lines now or brands than there were before, but there's still that. The other easy answer is you just start with the briefs and the squat, and look at the person's squat. For instance, you know, we knew where we need your squat to be for the gear to be the most optimized, but it's not going to be where it needs to be the most optimized. We're going to be a little shy of where it needs to be, because all your squatting history has been in front of where that needs to be.
Right.
As far as how far you're sitting back. So it's unrealistic to think in 10 weeks, 12 weeks, we're going to get him sit all the way back where it needs to be, because you're going to be weak back there, because that's not where you're used to, not necessarily weak back there. That's not where you're used to going. So you're not going to have the neural connection.
Oh, for sure. Oh, absolutely.
To be able to know what to do when you're back there. There's still going to be that, oh shit, I shouldn't be in this position shift, and then it knocks out of that position. So I don't know if I'm really doing a good job of answering the question, but you know, when somebody seems fresh and it's looking well, then you put it on. You know, if it's newer gear and it's a little big, you can start putting it on for everything just to break it in a little bit, because it is kind of like a baseball glove too.
Right.
From that, but usually if you're just putting in single ply briefs, you can put those in for about anything right from the beginning. It's not going to give that much of a carryover, which managing the carryover becomes part of the problem with the overuse as well. You know, because say you put on the briefs and you deadlift way more. All right. Well, then that next week your deadlift's going to suck. But if you're not ahead of that, which we weren't, you're not ahead of that, you can't let that person know. Then they wonder what the fuck just happened. How come it's so easy? These briefs suck. They were good last week. Maybe they broke in too much. You know, so there's managing those expectations with that as well. Fortunately, I don't think this is such a big problem, because there's not that many year lifters.
Right.
But the same nuances and the same open closed type of game is going to play into all training, though, because if you have somebody that's like, they have the mindset of, I'm just doing whatever I'm told. Okay, if you're a beginner, that might be all right. But
Once you start moving some weight, that could be a problem.
Yes, and you need to know the right questions to ask, you know, as that's going through, so the coach can be able to help guide you through that.
Yeah.
You know, there could be some days that are like, hey, you know, that first exercise or two is fun, great, shut it down. What do you mean? And when all was all great, no, shut it down.
Yeah.
There's nothing more you're going to do today that's going to get us any further ahead than what you currently are right now.
Yep.
There's nothing. You're not going to get more ahead. You're already ahead.
Right.
Right. So being more ahead is just, it's a risk that we don't need. You know, other days it could just be grinding days. You're like, fuck, this is just terrible. And the answer to that could be, we just need to keep grinding more.
Right.
Right. Because, and that doesn't make sense. Both of these things seem opposite, right? You feel really good, shut it down. Feels like shit, you need to grind through. But by that, I'm not saying miss.
Right. There's never a miss involved.
There's never a miss. I'm just saying grind through, because you're dealing with many systems here. You're dealing with emotional systems, physical systems, mental systems. You're dealing with all these different things. If somebody's grinding through and everything feels like shit, and you just say, okay, look, man, shut it down.
Yeah, you're never going
It's
to
too
reach
bad.
that point.
Shut it down.
Right.
They're going to leave thinking they're a failure. They got nothing done. Everything's going backwards. Everything they did leading up to that was just leading to an overtraining state, to where if you can manage that state to where it's not going to be worse, but you can just keep it so the recovery demands aren't going to be more so than what they already are. But they can walk out thinking, you know what, I came in feeling like shit, but I got some work done. Right? And then that's managing those expectations to where they can come back the next time. They're like, you know what? That might not have been the best day, but damn it, I did this shit.
Yeah, I got better.
I got this next time. You know, I will be more ready next time. I'm going to rest more. I'm going to not play hoops on Friday all day. Right?
Right.
So when I come into squat, you know, maybe I'll play one less pickup game instead of 12.
Right.
Which, I mean, these are all real world
for sure.
things that have been going on.
And I think one of the situations where that was actually the case is when I was first starting out. I had this new pair of like training briefs on. And I'm like, what the fuck am I? I'm like, this feels so foreign to me. And one of the first training sessions you had me do, it was like 15 sets of 2, right? And we worked up, and I eventually over the next few weeks, it was like, got up to the point where it was like 25 sets of 2. And about halfway through that, I'm like, this fucking sucks. Like, this sucks. I feel so strange doing this. But because of that high amount of reps that I was doing, I was able to get to a point where I just shut your fucking brain off and just do the thing. Just do the thing, shut up and do it. And by the time I was done, I was like, all right, I made it. It wasn't fun, but I made it. But then the next few weeks, it was like, oh, this is starting to feel a little bit more natural. I don't feel as crazy doing this shit. I don't feel as, strange and uneven and unbalanced. And there's just a time where, but you were able to see that, and you were able to say, like, yeah, like 10 sets of 2 were good, 15 sets of 2 were good, 20 sets of 2 were good, but like, let's do a little bit more. And it was that 20 to 25. I was like, fuck. It was like the last 5.
Yeah.
And I was starting to get tired, and I was like really fatigued. But like, I was like, I need to focus in on the technique of what I'm doing and really take my thoughts and my negative thoughts that I had about what I was doing in my training and just get them the fuck out of there, because they weren't helping. And by the end of it, I was like, oh, yeah, like, I guess this is how you learn a skill.
Well, yeah, and the other factor with that is conditioning is not your problem. I mean, coming into this, conditioning was not your problem. So you were conditioned. So usually a wave like that would be conditioning for a lot of people. Look, they need to be able to recover better. This is, not the greatest conditioning in the world, but it's probably more than what most people are ever going to see.
Right.
But you're trying to learn the briefs. You're trying to learn the skill of the briefs. And over that 3-week period of time, you had more than 100 reps with those briefs in a mental state that you're able to actually think about what you're doing with the briefs. Because 1 to 2 reps, you can still stay in that state. 5, you start thinking, I just fucking get 5.
Yeah, just get through it.
Right? You take that and you look at 100 technical reps to be able to not only break in the briefs, but break your mind into how to use the briefs, compared to a typical 3 sets of 5, 3 sets of 3, so you're looking at a difference of 9 reps over 3 weeks, maybe 15 reps, 3 sets of 5, 3 weeks, 15, 9 reps compared to 100 to 150.
Yeah.
Right, that's a huge difference. So that way, when that second phase comes and the load starts going up a little bit, to where now you're going to start to feel, okay, this is a little bit of pressure, but the pattern.
Right.
You know,
You
the
grooved
pattern
it.
has been kind of ingrained in there through the practice of what that is. So a lot of people have questioned me on, like, why do you do these 3-week waves of all these? Well, there's multiple reasons why. You know, and where they're placed becomes the strategic factor, right? So that goes back to that open system again. Does he need it? Does he not need it?
Right.
You know, so in the program I did with John, the fuck is that even called? Anyway?
Unity.
The Unity program, the first 3 weeks have that. Some people need it, some people don't. You know, so they reach out and like, hey, should I do this? Should I not? Well, if you're asking, you probably should.
Right. Absolutely.
Right. And then there's other people that shouldn't. There's no harm in doing it at the beginning of a 12-week phase, but there would be some people, you know, that I would say, probably nah.
Yeah.
You know, you're set on all that. It's not necessary.
Yeah. I mean, it's, and to go back to kind of what we were talking about the open and closed and that nuance is you were able to look at how I was doing, look at how I was feeling, kind of like how I was walking between the rack and talking to Adam, just all the nonverbals, all of, and you were able to determine, yep, okay, we're good. Like, now we can get a little heavier for the next phase. If I was just beat to shit from that alone, you may have been like, okay, well, you may run this again for another 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Right?
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not,
but
because you can manage that and what you do after.
Absolutely.
So there's a benefit to what you do, and this is going back to that open-closed system again. There's a huge benefit to what you do after because you know what you're doing.
Right.
So that eliminates a lot of that. So it's just kind of looking over, okay, it's fine, it's good, done. It's it's not like the high school kids.
Yeah.
You know, to where now you got to really look, what are they doing, what are they not doing,
Right.
and all the those things associated with that, because that's where more variability comes in and where it needs to be more open. Because let's say it was not open, and here's the program. You do section A, B, C, you know, there's these 5 movements, that's what you're doing. And then you come in with the experience and awareness that you have of your body. The only real questions you're having are the first 2 things, right? They're the most important things that are in there.
Right.
After that, I'm stupid to be able to say, hey, Sam, you should do this, 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 and this for your accessories. You know what you need to do based upon how it feels.
Yep.
So closed system, I'm trying to tell you what to do, which is going to make that peaking process way non-optimal, right? Where now it's like, you. Right? Just do you. Do what you think that you need to do, because you know you better than I know you. Right? So
Absolutely.
that's what I'm talking about with that open closed. Now there's other people, high school kids that come out here and they don't know. So then that becomes more a matter of I'm not really telling them. We're all kind of seeing different things. It's like, hey, you should do this, you should do this. So then there's this combined collective of insight going into that, which goes beyond my 40 years of experience. You start tacking on your 20, Todd's 30. You know, now there's hundreds of years of experience to say, hey, what do you think of this, them doing this, them doing this? Like, fuck, I don't know, man. This is like outside of my wheelhouse. Go have, like, lower back. I'm like, fuck it. Sam knows better than me. Go see Sam.
Sure.
You know, you just push it that way, which becomes every ring you add to this system, you know, like a tree, right? The tree rings, every ring makes this base bigger, stronger, more successful over a long period of time. You know, a tree that's thin and brittle, right? The coach that thinks they know fucking everything,
You're going to get whipped around in every single direction, right?
breaks, right? So when I'm looking at that closed system, here's a 12-week program, stick to it no matter what. Isn't that kind of like the coach that knows everything in a way?
Absolutely.
You know, the more advanced somebody becomes. Beginners can do anything, you know, so I'll just put that out there.
Right.
But the other thing with, yes, beginners can have success getting bigger, getting stronger, doing anything. I don't think anybody's going to disagree with that. But I will come in and sweep in and say, yes, but you're also establishing habits.
Yep.
So why not establish better habits on exercise technique, how to control movements, how to control tempos, you know, how to kind of think of what muscle they're actually training, you know, the things that usually take people who love what they're doing 3 or 4 years to be like, wow, man, that's a lat pump.
Yep.
And why not help them from that very start
Oh, absolutely.
to be able to know that, you know, because then that feedback they can give back becomes better.
Right. And actually one example of that is we were It was after a squat day. I think it was like a dynamic day. And you told me, all right, we're going to hit your hamstrings. And I was like, all right, that's fine. And I was like, how many reps? You're like, 8 to 12. But then you put the nuance in, essentially saying, make sure you're a little bit sore.
Mm-hmm.
And that in my head, right, from my experience is like, oh, control the tempo, worry about the contraction, worry about, the weight doesn't necessarily matter. It's the actual contraction of the muscles that we're looking for.
Yes.
But that instance of you telling me, make sure you're a little bit sore with it, was years and years of experience of being like, oh, this is what happens when I do it this way. This is what happens when I do it this way. Mm-hmm. This is the outcome that I get if I train like this. Because if you told a younger athlete, 8 to 12, make sure you're sore. That could be, you could get a wildly different outcome.
Oh, big time.
Wildly different. And I think that open and closed kind of situation that we're talking about is so important, because it's not the fact that you told me exactly what to do. In fact, you didn't tell me exactly what to do. You gave me an outcome.
Yes.
You gave me a goal.
Yes.
And I had to use the experience that you've given me and the experience that I've had in my life to reach that goal. So it on paper, it's like, oh, Dave just said to like be sore 8 to 12. It's like, no, there's so much more that led to that decision than just like a number and an effort level.
Yes.
Right?
The other validation I can put out with this, and I suppose all these validations are anecdotal, but just think it through, because sometimes it's just common sense.
Right.
I think it's common sense. To me, it's not that super complicated. Is the critics of West Side Conjugate. Mm-hmm. I'm going to say West Side Conjugate because I'm going to talk classical West Side and what they do. The critics of West Side Conjugate is that shit doesn't work. It doesn't work. And they'll give you a million reasons why it doesn't work. And then they're going to say, then the follow-up question to them is, well, then why is he put out so many super strong athletes? Mm-hmm. Well, the environment, of course, and that's what they say. Oh, okay. So now what you're validating is that the open system works better than the closed system.
Yep.
Right? Because you're taking something that here's this 9-week program based upon West Side Conjugate, which is closed system.
Yep.
Right? And here's that open system that's validating what I'm saying.
That's it, right.
So where I would sweep in there, and this being Conjugate West Side biased, is if that open system is linear, it's still going to outperform a closed linear system or a closed conjugate system.
Right.
Any open system will outperform. Why? Mm-hmm. Why? Here's the big takeaway. Why? A closed system can't speak. This program can't say, hey, I'm the unity program.
Yeah,
I want to blend with a conjugate program.
Yeah.
That program wouldn't have existed if John and I never talked.
You talked a lot.
You have to talk, right? And that's still a closed system.
Absolutely.
Right? But the piece of paper, the app, the AI, it can't coach. Mm-mm. Right? It only has the ability to display potential outcomes with less error. Mm-hmm. Now that's valuable.
Oh,
the
for
coach
sure.
needs to use, technology.
Yep.
Because there's a lot of errors. And training's almost all errors.
Yeah,
right? So
right.
now if you can use technology that programmed the right way and moving forward as it has, it's going to eliminate a lot of errors that are typically made.
Oh, yeah.
You're stupid to not use the technology that's going to eliminate a lot of these errors.
Yep.
But they're never going to eliminate all of it. So the answer is a combination, the technology and the open system, right? So that's what we're seeing at the highest levels, of sports development and stuff like that. But what I think we're starting to see, at least what I'm starting to see, is they're relying too much on all the technical data without using the open system experience of the coach to be able to help teach that.
And that's the key.
Yes, because even if this AI program, app, whatever it turns out to be, has the answers to everything, wearable technology, the answers to everything, it's not going to be able to get the point across to whoever the athlete is.
No.
They might be able to read it, they might be able to see it, hell, they may even be able to hear it. But that's different than actually coaching it.
Yeah.
And being able to get it through.
And it's like the example with like an HRV, right? You get an athlete that's on their Apple Watch, or they have a ring or whatever, and that app says, oh, your HRV is shitty today, don't train hard. But if they could walk in the gym and they're like, I feel fucking great. Like, it's like, how much do you weigh the HRV versus their subjective experience of their, how they're feeling? It's like, you don't really know how you're going to feel in the gym, how you're going to perform. Like you can't, and as we all know, like wearables are, I think, upwards of like 30% inaccurate one way or the other.
Yes.
They're consistent, but they're just inaccurate.
Not really consistent.
Right? But at the end of the day, it's like if that thing says that you're only at like a 7 out of 10 in terms of readiness, but you get in the gym, you're like, I feel fucking great.
Yeah.
It's like you can't base your entire training system on one wearable.
Yeah, well, come game day, meet day, show day, whatever it is. What if your wearable says you're a 6?
Right.
The fuck?
Yeah.
And every time you were a 6 before, you condition yourself, need to take it easy today.
Yep.
Right? So it depends a lot on the mindset of the person, too. There's a lot of people you're going to say, okay, I hear your body saying that you're a 5. They're like, fuck that.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
exactly.
And vice versa. But that's where the coaching comes in.
Right.
Right? Because the coach will know the athlete. Right? And I know coaches that have used the Oreo ring, but they don't let the athlete see.
That's so it's such a good idea.
Because then they're more hyper aware, like, okay, I need to watch, need to be able to see. They don't know what's going on. And then if they see it with their using an unbiased eye, because they don't want to go in there and say, hey, look, he's supposed to be dragging ass, and you see him dragging ass just because you're looking for him to drag ass.
Yeah, right.
You know, so but if it validates and it's like, okay, look, you need to back it down. Right? So they're making up for that. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Exactly. Yeah,
is
right.
being able to use that to their advantage, because if these metrics say be a little bit more aware, here, then you can spend more time looking there, or looking. Here's the bigger thing: looking at why are they there?
Yeah. Yep.
Right? Because okay, yes, they're down, but why are they down? Are they down because they're physically down, or are they down because their marital relationship is on the rocks and they're throwing dishes at each other all night long? You know, what is that? Because you can deregulate that day to account for that, but if this problem,
if that persists,
then you know that you gotta look into. I'm not telling you to be the counselor for that. No, but there you can be aware of what's going on and find somebody that is qualified to be able to help.
Yeah,
with that transition.
And I think at the end of the day, one of the things that if you're in this open system, or if you're ever lucky enough to train out here with this crew that we have, every session, the goal is to make you better, obviously, at your sport, at whatever it is you're doing, but you learn every single weekend. And like that's the markings of a good coach, is getting you to a point where you learn more and more and more. And you develop those skills. You, like you had said, develop those rings on a tree. You grow, you develop. And it's a really cool thing to be a part of and see, because it's like you can have conversations with us, like very nuanced conversations in like 1 or 2 words. It's like, we know exactly what the fuck you're talking about. It's like, oh yeah, go do this. And then like, man, make it suck. It's like, okay, we know what that means. Right? But there has been a conditioning process that led up to that. It's like, you don't know all the answers to start. And that's why if you're talking to like an online coach or whatever, and if they're not willing to have a real conversation with you, like sit down to have a conversation for an hour or 2 and like put some work in and some time and get some information about you and learn about where you're coming from, what your experiences are, where you're training, the stressors in your life, your job. It's like all of these things matter.
Yes.
Because if I just walk into the gym and Dave sees me dragging ass, he knows like, oh, he really doesn't do that much, right? Like he's never really in a position where he's really dragging ass and things suck. It's like, maybe we should reel this one in for today, right?
Yes.
But that's just based on, again, the conversations, the experience, the hours and hours that we spent together in here training together. He's able to see that. But without that information, that background, if it was just like a 1 or a 0, like you wouldn't really be able to make a good decision.
Without that conversation, that closed system becomes no different than a closed system of just buying somebody's program online. Right. Which some you can find for free, some may cost in upwards of $150, $200. You know, not much for 12 whatever time period of 16 weeks a year, whatever that program is going to be for. Yep. But then you're comparing, in my sight, apples to apples. I mean, why are you going to pay 10 times as much for the same closed system that this is? Yeah. Right. That's where it becomes difficult when, you know, we're sitting down, we're talking about how do we get an open system that we can bring as a service to the market. Right. Because this closed system services that are available now, they're all essentially the same.
Yeah, and there are gaps.
There's there's huge gaps. So I don't want to do the same.
No.
Right? Because then you got to compete with, $5 a month. Then your system becomes so fucking closed. It's something I can't even get excited about.
No.
It's just whatever.
Right.
Here's a workout. I mean, there's nothing there.
Right.
Where that open side becomes more challenging because it can't be the same as walking in a gym with somebody that it can't be that. And that could be a training partner, by the way. You train with the same person for a long period of time, but you can still keep that critical conversation open.
Yeah.
Because the other thing that happens is coaches will get too close or training partners will get too close and they don't want to say, look, your squat's high as fuck. Or actually, no, you're fatter and fuck right now for where you need to be getting ready for this show.
Right.
It becomes confirmation bias. You can't have that. It's kind of a shitty partner.
Yeah, and I think kind of moving on in a similar but different direction is one of the best parts of working with a training partner or working with a coach in person and being able to have that open system is to genuinely and as close as you possibly can objectively understand effort, right? I know we had gotten a few questions on how do you know when max effort you're hitting the point of where you need to be versus overdoing it versus not doing enough, right? And a lot of newer lifters are in that point where they don't understand like what a heavy single should feel like. They don't have that experience, right? And in a system where you have training partners, it's like you may have felt, as someone who did the rep, you may have felt like, oh, that was really heavy, but everybody around you was like, no, you definitely have more in the tank, right? To be able to have that feedback. How would you say, like, to start kind of learning that as an individual or as a coach trying to work with athletes is like to be able to determine effort with people? Because, I mean, we're going to go through them here in a little bit. You are like one of the kings of max effort being really max effort, it basically, I mean, obviously people have seen videos of you squatting until you puke, and we'll jump into one of those here in a minute. But I think going over that a little bit more of like determining that effort, that like kind of scale in your head about where you're at.
There's different levels, obviously. So if we're talking conjugate, we're talking max effort. I want to make sure the context is within scope here. So we're not talking about the singles leading up to a meet. If it's a linear program, whatever, it's this max effort, conjugate, intermediates, beginners. The first thing I would say is you want to do the exercises that you're good at. You're good at them for a reason, right? Because you're better at performing them.
Right.
So I'm making the assumption your technical efficiency is better, which means your risk of falling out of the groove, falling into a position that's compromising is going to be less than what you're going to find on newer exercises. And if you add in newer exercises and you're stronger at them, it's usually because your frame and your structure is built to accommodate those exercises a little bit better, which means they're going to be a little bit lower risk than otherwise. Making a lot of assumptions here, right? Because somebody can do really, really shitty looking work that could have compromised positions but not know it, especially at the beginner level. But they're also at the beginner level, which lowers the risk too, because the load typically isn't going to be that strong. And you could make the argument that even an exercise done horribly in max effort conditions can still accomplish the same goal as what I cringe when I say this, but you can make the argument. I could listen to somebody make the argument and would have to agree with most of what they say. Okay, not all of it, but most of it I'd have to agree with. Yes, a stronger shitty lift is still a stronger shitty lift. Where I will disagree is where's the transfer? Is that going to transfer to what you're actually trying to develop? Be one of the power lifts or a sport skill. So that gets lost in the conversation too much, by the way, the transfer and what is transferring, what energy system, what skill set, what ability is transferring. That's a whole other podcast for another time.
Yeah, right.
That gets lost a lot. So to get back to this, there's going to be different levels of this. The first level is just to basically understand what it's like to actually strain while you do a lift. Most people won't even know what that really is because they've never done it before. They'll think of maxing out, right? But a lot of people, depending on muscle fiber type, could max out. Yes, the bar is going to slow down. Obviously, it's going to slow down, but it still may feel fast to them. And it may not be a grind because they haven't developed the skill yet to grind for 3, 4, 5 seconds.
Right.
So they can grind for 2 and then it's just done. So they bench, say it's a board press or whatever, one board press or just a regular close grip bench press. They get it off their chest, 1, 2 drops. A lot of ways to look at that. Well, my mid position sucks. Is it that? Or do you just not know how to grind for more than the 2 seconds? So then you start looking at other max effort lifts. You start looking at how long are you grinding for on these other lifts.
Yeah, it's like, did you maintain a good position and like where you needed to be, right?
Yeah, so it's not necessarily, you need to develop that mid part. Maybe you need to develop the ability to strain for another couple seconds, or maybe it's just the inability to be able to strain in that section. There are a lot of variables, but the first place I would look is, oddly enough, most of you guys are all missing in the same time period.
Yeah.
Within 1.5 to 2.5 seconds, whatever it's going to be, you just don't have the ability to strain. So that becomes, how do you increase that ability to strain? You find exercises that can be able to strain for a longer time under tension, or you just start holding, the start a little bit longer before you lower it. You hold the lockout a little bit longer. There's a lot of methodologies for that. But that's what the first factor is. It doesn't matter where their emotional capacity is if their physical capacity is only going to allow them to strain for so long.
Sure.
Right? So that's the first thing. The other thing is fear. Where does the fear play in?
Very real.
That's a part of this. And then you can exceed the capacities of what normal straining is, but there's always a cost. So what is that weight of that? And mentally, whereas your max lifts, from my experience, can't be done in the same mindset as the lifts under 90%. There has to be a shift, right? And everybody's going to have a difference on how that shift is going to be. 90% of that lift for that day, right? Because that becomes a weird number to start throwing out, because if you're not peaked, if you haven't done the exercise for a long time, your 90% of your best 1 rep max might actually be your 1 rep max.
Right.
So your 90% of that day is actually 80% of what your 1 rep max is. So I'm leery on that. And I'm not telling you that you need to go berserk, right, for the 90% and above, because that might not be you. Some people, it's a confidence thing. It's all confidence to me. It doesn't matter how you get them in that confident state. If they're laughing, giggling, if that's what it takes, that's what it takes. If they need to be distracted, you're talking about stupid shit, go. Right. If it has to be last minute, like, oh shit, we forgot, you need to go now.
Yeah.
We're on the clock, go.
Yeah.
Whatever it is for that person, they got to kind of figure out for themselves and use that, but you can't use it too much, because it's the way, that's at the higher level, right? Not all max effort work needs to be taken to that higher emotional level. Not 10% maybe. Right. But at some point, I think it has to go to that higher emotional level, because that's where your reality of what you can do and can't do pivots. Right? Because it's a different you that's kind of doing that. When that state needs to be called upon, like I said, you got to know what your trigger is. How do you get there? And this is where people fuck up, by the way, because they might see what I'm doing. They say, I'm going to do that. No, or
that's not what you do. Right.
They have to hit smelling salts and get all wired up. And for a lot of people, this is all 100% true. But for a lot of other people, it's not. But then the people who that does work for are trying to get them to do what they do. And then it doesn't work. Right. Because it's all that matters is when you get under the bar, you're confident it can happen. So, or you're not there, which is the other thing. But that's still confidence, because if you're not there, you're not aware that, anything else. So is that kind of, before we get into what I actually do, I mean, is that
I think that's it's a good kind of explanation of how again, it even comes back to the open and closed conversations that we had before is like, you need to understand what works for you, right? You need to figure out where you need to go in your head, physically, mentally, emotionally, whatever you need to do the task at hand. Like for me, I'm not going to get all sorts of jacked up. Like in my head, I'm jacked up, but like externally, physically, I'm not jumping around. I'm not fucking slamming my head against the bar. I'm kind of quiet. I like to calm the machine before I do the task. I'll hit a little smelling salts if I need to just get, again, that shift. And it's less about the actual impact of the salts, and it's more of just like, just shift. It's like, this is a phase shift from where you are now to what the task is at hand.
Yes, and it's watching, because I know you're like that. So the other thing is watching what the task is. Right? So if this is just a max effort exercise for you, I'm not going to worry that much about it. Here's what it is, what's going to be. Now, if this is a max effort exercise and its specificity is close to what the sport skill is, the squat with the gear, and it's critical that you actually make it. You know, and the athlete knows this is critical that they actually make it, which means there's doubt.
Yes.
As soon as you think there's critical, there's a yin yang.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So it's a battle between the yin yang. So a little game that I'll play with people is when you don't really know what the trigger is, you just start telling them to get their head right. Right? And then when they look at you, you say, no, get your fucking head right. Now they're asking themselves, am I not where I need to be?
Right.
So either way, you win. Right? With that. But I'm not saying get fired. A lot of my friends will get fired up, all this. No, you don't need that. You go too high on the arousal curve. Everybody can search the arousal curve. You go too high, you're going to self-destruct. But you need to be able to, when it's that level, and I know that this lift matters. I mean, this matters not just from the physical standpoint, it matters in how the whole rest of the training cycle is going to go. Right? And you got to be prepared if it doesn't happen, what are you going to say? What's going to be the course correction from that? But it matters. So that changes that level from, say, a standard max effort or a PR to an MF PR, like the motherfucking PR.
Absolutely.
Right? The motherfucking PRs really matter. Right? And it could be in that setting, or for me, with a lot of those times, it matters because it's what I'm actually training for. Because I don't have meets, I don't have this other stuff. It's, this is what I've been trying to get to. Or if doubt, if I can't get that fucking shit out of my head, and it's like, man, my fucking groin's been jacked up, this has been jacked up, and I gotta find a way to eliminate it and go through. Right. The fire, no matter what it's going to be. That's another level. Both, I think, are important in the long term, because both of them re-establish, it's like a reboot. Because once you come through it and you don't miss, then you're like, fuck, I'm where I really need to be, or I'm ahead of where I need to be. So it's okay for me to crank it back down for a few more weeks, let everything else heal, and then drive it back up again, because I don't have any time frame. But if it's you guys and here's where the meat is and here's where this is, it's a good indicator, like, okay, fucking cool. There's only 7 weeks left. This is actually a little ahead of pan. It's okay to back it down a couple of weeks, then drive it back up. Because it becomes that better indicator, because you can go from a lift that's straining and look hard to the next lift, 20 pounds heavier, that just kills it.
Right.
But you need to understand, when that happens, I call them zippy cards. When that happens, you only have so many cards. So at that point, it's like, that's it. You're no more. You're 40 pounds ahead. No more. Go from that. Rolling. I've always said it. I can have no more than 3 zippy cards a day, and that's if it's over a whole period of time, like a meet. Three times I can get really fired up in a meet. That's it. A training session, it's 1. Like I got 1 zippy card. That's all it is. Maybe 2. That's it. I get over that, the risk benefit. First, it's not going to be there. It's I'm pushing beyond expectations at that point. So for me, I go to Pluto. The Void video kind of talks about this, but not. Because I never talk about, in those Void videos, when I'm talking about that void state, I'm only talking about the state. Right. I'm not talking about how I get there. right? And when that the first void video was made, it was after a challenge set of leg presses that was just brutal as all fuck. That's different because you start a challenge set as a normal human. And then at some point for me, it's like, fuck.
Yeah.
And then it just switches.
Well, I think we can actually, Jacob, if you want to put that on, I think that'll be good to kind of showcase.
Than, well, let me make the difference here first. That's different when you're in one of those challenge sets. And people can find the deadlift ones that John and I did. The first rep looks like horse shit. And then, boom, I flip it, and then there's more. That's different in the challenge sets because it's multiple reps, it's high exertion. That's different. When it's a single, you have to go into the single in that emotional state. When it's a challenge set, you need to go in almost as relaxed as you can because you're going for distance.
Right.
And the more aggressive you go into it, the more you're taking off that back end. I can make the same statement that the more aggressive you go into a single, you might be taken off of the back end, but if it's a short enough time period, there is no back end. You're taking off the next set or the set after that, which goes back to the zippy card thing.
Right.
Right. Now, if it's just a single, you need to be in that fuck you state before you get under the bar. So that's what they see with this stupid shit that I do.
Yeah. So this would be more of a challenge set for sure, right?
Well, this is a single, right?
Yep. Yeah. So what now is it on the screen now, I imagine?
It's on the screen now. You guys can talk though.
Cool. So what was kind of the background of what's going on here?
All right, so this is a challenge set. So this is
this is it?
No, this is a couple. I think I wanted to do a single.
Oh, sorry, the timestamp you gave me.
Yep. Okay, so on that one, I wanted to do a single, so I took myself to that crazy zone.
Yep.
And I killed it.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, fuck this, I'm doing more.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. So whenever I sit down on the box for a long period of time, that's just me saying, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. And that's then it's like, I'll show your fucking ass.
Yeah.
And then stand up. So that's kind of like my explanation point if I do stuff like that. But I'm going into it already there in that certain mode. But if you go back to this one again, go back to the start of this one. Okay, you're seeing that, yes, I'm in that mental crazy ass place. I am still thinking about what I have to do though.
Right.
That's ingrained. So how I'm supposed to breathe, how I'm supposed to brace, this is automatic here. So if it's not happening and I have to like I had to breathe twice to be able to get through my nose the right way, I was cognizant enough to know fix this, but it's on autopilot.
Right.
This is another reason why I think going into those hyper states like this matters because you can test, is this on autopilot, is this not? Because if a competitor goes to compete, they will end up going in autopilot most of the time.
Oh, absolutely.
And if they go in that autopilot and everything goes to shit, then what's the point? Because they don't know how to control the beast or whatever you want to call that. Is that the only one you have?
That's the only video of a lift, but we have some other stuff.
All right, show me. So the other thing is the marking. Show some of the other ones. So the FU marking. So this is probably a single here. So you see the FU on my chest. Go to another one. There's a heart and an FU. That was Valentine's Day, right? So I tried to be creative.
Yeah, right.
It was a Valentine's Day video, but there's still the FU. Go to another one. Then there's the FU there. That was before my hip replacement. Actually, you see there's 3.
Yeah, I do.
That means I used 3 zippy cards that day.
Yep.
Because I mark myself every time I have to do it.
Yep.
Right? So here's
and then you got this one after your hip surgery.
Yes. So this one, is this just a picture? All right, yeah, this one's got 1 FU because it was only 1 set because it hurt like a motherfucker.
Yeah.
So there was not gonna. This was just a easy warm-ups, load it and go.
Yeah.
You don't need to play this thing through because it's just a shake fest. But that mark, that FU mark, is something. I've never told this shit before. Something that I've been doing for ever since I can remember. Right. So I'll go to the chalk bowl and not mentally be, I'm mentally where I want to be, but I want to be somewhere else. I want to go to a different level. Everybody's got different things that they run through your head, right? Some people just visualize the weight and, I've done all that kind of bullshit. I've done all that. I get to this point, I start thinking before I even get there, fuck you to basically everybody that's ever fucked me in my life. Like, fuck you to these people that thought I wasn't going to be smart enough to go to fucking first grade. Fuck these teachers, fuck this, fuck these fucking judges, and just fuck everything, man. I'm getting so fucking pissed because of all the situations where people are trying to tell me, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this. It's like, fuck you, and that just fucking pisses me off like you can't believe. And as it does anybody that thinks back on things that they've had to go through, that just pisses them off, where somebody said this, that's not to undermine anybody that's actually helped, right? But it's just it's fucking, and I get so fucking mad, about it that I want to fucking kill somebody. Then I grab that and then I write F you on my heart or on my leg. On my heart because that's where it's coming from, on my leg because I can see it. That's when I realize they didn't fucking do this to me. I let them. This is in my fucking control. I let them tell me I couldn't do this. I let them, and I fucking believed them. And when I fucking believed them, that was on me. So that fuck you is me, which means I can do whatever the fuck I want to do, and this bar is not gonna fucking beat me. And then, boom, that's where I get that confidence, because that fucking bar most certainly isn't gonna fucking have the same power over me as these fuckers thought that they had. Not now, not today, not ever. Fuck that. Fuck you, and I fucking go. And that's what it is. And it drives me fucking crazy right now.
Yeah.
Because that's what puts that accountability. They didn't fucking do this. Hell, they probably didn't even mean to do half the shit that they thought that they did. I let them. I interpreted it that way. I let them think I was stupid. I let them think all these things. That's me. That's not them. I'm accountable for that, right? And isn't that what that max effort shit is, right? So if there's any reason why I still do that shit, it's my reminder to me, I'm accountable for everything that happens to me. Not you, him, the company, this person, that person, society, the fucking government, anything. It's fucking me. I'm accountable. So if it happens to me, it's because I let it fucking happen to me. So that mark is that coming on me, taking accountability that this weight, like I just said, does not rule me. It will never fucking rule me. It might hurt me, it might beat me, but it does not fucking rule me. And I'm not gonna give it the chance to fucking rule me because I don't have the heart to fucking give everything I have to go against it. That's where that comes from. This is why I can only play so many fucking zippy cards.
Right.
Because I'm fucking shaking right now just thinking about it. That's what I need to do for me to get to that other level, is to take all that emotional fucking baggage and rage and flip it and say, that's not. You know what I'm saying? Most people will use that, and I could use that and say, oh no, I'm fucking victim of the weight beast. No.
Nope.
I'm not using it that way, because this is me. Had I known back then what I know now, that shit never would have flied. I would have found a way around that. So this is what is that pivot where in some way for the rest of my fucking life, I'm going to find a way to mark that on my fucking body and challenge myself, is that reminder to me for that. And that's what I'm saying. Sometimes training is more than just training, right? So it could be 115 pounds, right? If I'm make it to fucking 80 years old, I can't stand up, and 115 is what it's going to be. It's going to be 115.
Yeah.
So that's, I'm not telling everybody that's what they need to do.
But they need to find whatever does that for them.
Yes. And what I will say is not only whatever does that for them, but can flip it in such a way that they realize they're accountable. Nobody did this to anybody. They're accountable.
Yep. And
everybody can tell whatever narrative they want to tell. I get that. But at the end of the day, aren't we all? At least we should be. Because nobody's going to lift that fucking weight for me.
No.
Right? No. Nobody. I mean, I got spotters in case I miss, which is what it should be.
Yeah. Lift it off of you.
Yes. I got enablers to help me do stupid shit, and I got realists. But in the end of the day, it's still you. Right? You still, and that whole thing is probably my grounding mechanism, because you take that away from me for too long, then, you know, just a little bit different. Yeah, I'm fucking sweating right now.
I know, that was fucking awesome. Jacob, clip that. Yeah, no, it's, but it also comes from that, like, you've been able to develop that for you based on your knowledge of yourself, having that self-awareness, having that, you know, that those experiences.
Well, okay, I'll back up. I mean, before all this, before I was able to start turning it, right? Then it was just a matter of, when I was in high school, I used to go into the men's bathroom and their locker room, and just start whacking my head on the bathroom stalls, right? Because I was not dumb enough to do it on a fucking brick wall. The stall has some give, and I would whack my fucking head against that so many times, and I would go. That's how I'd get all excited to go do that. And then for a long time, I used to whack my head on the bar, which don't do. That was stupid. Knocked myself out once, and got red lighted, kicked out of a meet once because blood was all over the place. That's stupid too. So there were other ways, but none of those ways, all those other ways we're doing was changing my state, right? And I realized I don't need that to change my state. I don't need to be like hurting myself to change the state. And even on a more moderate level, you know, the ammonia caps and salts and stuff like that, they do help. But there's a lot of times where I'll grab them, crack them, and throw them on the ground. I don't even eat them, because I know where I need to be. Right. And if I'm not really there, but I'm really close, then that can kind of help kind of kick it over a little bit. But if I'm already there, I'm not going to go too far, because I'll make stupid fucking mistakes, because you still got to focus, the feet right, bracing right. There's still a mental checklist. You know, you can't be so far out that you get underneath there and you become an idiot, and you can't do what you're supposed to do, because then that becomes that other side of that arousal curve. So that's where the skill comes in. Like, you don't want to go, you know, hyper fucking nuts if your skill sucks.
Yeah, you don't have that wiggle room to be able to do that.
Yes.
I mean, it's funny. You see a lifter like Dan Green, right? You never see him getting overly jacked up, fired up. And it's the craziest thing to watch somebody like that. It's like he'll do 700-pound sumo deficits for like a set of 5, and you see the first rep, and it doesn't really go that well, and you're like, holy shit, he does 4 more of these? But it is. You can tell that there is like that switch. Once you get locked in, once you get to that point of that phasic shift from the beginning of that task to completing that task, they get better and better and better, right? And then you see...
Yes, to me, it all boils down to that confidence factor. You know, it's whatever it takes to be able to get there. Like, there's no way this is not going to happen, right? And if it goes south, it goes south, but before there's no way. There's absolutely no way. Some people have to do different things. That we're all different. You know, like I said before, some people in that same state that I'm talking about, confidence, laughing. That's what I'm saying is you can't mirror this person or mirror this person and be able to say, well, this is what I need to do. Right? You know, anger and rage is one emotion.
Absolutely.
You know, to get one state. That's what a lot of people may use. Other people can't use that because, let's say, take my whole rant and say I wasn't able to create the self-accountability at the very end before I go into the bar. And it's just fuck them, fuck them, fuck them, fuck them, fuck them, fuck them. All that internal stimulus is external stimulus is now external. Right? It's not. Then I'm like, what? There's no motivation factor.
It's not directed.
What, this squat, I'm going to prove them wrong? They ain't going to see this stupid ass thing. And there ain't no squat I'm ever going to do that's going to prove any critic of mine ever wrong. You know, fuck, there's no squat you're ever going to do that's going to anybody's going to fucking care about. You're the only one that's going to care anyhow. You know, so if I don't turn it inwards, then it's going to work against me. You know, for that. So anger, I don't think is the best route.
It's only one tool in a toolbox.
And and even with that, I don't think it's the best route unless you can flip it and make it like, no, this is me. You know, a lot of these situations I get pissed about, I probably created, to be completely honest with you. You know, so why am I mad? You know, I'm mad at me. Well, then why? Because I did it. Well, if I did it, then this is accountability. Then why can't I do this?
Yeah, right. No, 100%. And it's interesting to see the different dynamics of the other people in the group, right? You have Adam, who most of the time we need to fucking pull the leash on because he gets too
down.
Yeah, he gets too fired up. He gets super jacked up. You got me, who's just very quiet and just kind of does the thing. I go to my own place in my head. I don't really talk about it too much, but it's just it's like a quiet. Again, it's a confidence thing. It's like let's just fucking do this thing. It's just I like to keep it as calm and surgical as I possibly can.
Yes.
Right, a totally different place. But again, it's if you're in a training group, it can't just be the same flavor for everybody.
Well, exactly. And I could never do that before a set of leg presses.
Oh,
I
yeah.
would get a triple. I get
Yeah,
5.
and then
I want to be able to breathe.
right.
You know, so it's what level, where is it going to kick in? How's it going to, hell, you don't even know if it's going to kick in if it's on a challenge set. You know, it's just, you hope it does, but you don't know.
Yeah.
You know, so that's the other thing is how you got to play it right, because there's a lot of neural shit going on. Heart rate's through the roof. All these things are through the roof. You're creating another recovery component or another recovery or stimulus that you're going to have to recover from.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, and that's where it becomes detrimental when people start doing it all the time. Then, okay, then what's next? You know, 3 weeks in a row of shit like that, I'm going to get hurt.
Yeah.
You know, guaranteed.
And again, I mean, even with something like ammonia, it's like that's why we have different levels of our ammonia, right? Like our dark side is like, yo, I don't want to fucking hit that every time.
Right?
That's the top end max. Like that's you don't hit that much.
No.
Like you keep that shit secure and whip it out when you need to, right? But that's because you're causing yourself a neurological stimulus that you need to recover from. That's exhausting. Your body's like on red alert. You can only be on red alert so many times, right? Ancient ancestors would get red alert when they're getting chased by a fucking dragon or a lion or whatever the fuck it is. Dragon. I don't know. I went to dragon first. But the fact of the matter is, the more you're in that heightened state, the less your body wants to heal, reproduce, eat.
Yes.
Like it's just trying to survive. So we're playing with this kind of trump card of like putting NOS in a car, right? Like it's like
That's exactly what it is.
and so you can only do that so many times before your engine blows up.
Oh, there's no NOS left to flip.
Exactly.
You know, it's out.
And then you're just fucking putting on the side of the road.
Exactly. So when to use it becomes, you know, that question. So I would say you don't use it unless you can do the max effort work in a slightly heightened state effectively to where everything's staying tight, braced, reinforced, you know. So you don't want to, let's put it this way, let me make it more practical. You don't want to waste all that NOS, right, on a lift that you end up technically failing.
Right.
Because how disappointing would that be?
Oof.
It's like, fuck, had I just been more aware and kept my position, I wouldn't need all this shit. You know, so when that technical awareness is solid, locked in, everything's locked in with that movement, you know, I'm not going to do that stupid shit with a movement that I'm still being equated with.
Oh, yeah, no.
You know, it's got to be locked in, solid, and history of, you know, several weeks or whatever with that movement. So it's 100% locked in. That's the last thing from my mind.
Yeah.
Is that something like that's going to happen. You know, getting hurt, yes, that's a possibility. That's probably more in my mind than that is. So anyhow, that's the max effort.
Yeah, so it essentially just the wrap up that portion, just kind of go back to the question is, if you're a beginner, you don't need to get to that state, right? You don't even need to get to technical failure. You need to just kind of push your limits a little bit, push the weight a little bit, get accustomed to the movement, get accustomed to the exercise, whatever you want to do, and build up over time. You shouldn't be looking to get all sorts of jacked up.
No,
if you haven't.
I mean, if you're going to get stronger each week you're on target, then you don't need it.
Exactly.
You don't need it. You know, a lot of the videos that you're seeing of me, those are peak weeks.
Right.
You know, that's not every fucking week.
Like those are your competitions.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, it will get before that big peak. There'll be a couple before that, you know, to be able to get there, but not that. And usually I will throw up when I go to that level. So
right.
That's the whole other thing. It's not for whatever reason, you know, it's just what it is. And that's how emotional draining it becomes. It's just like, I'm summoning the demons, you know, and the demons come in and then I vomit them all out.
Right.
You know, my body, I don't know what the hell it is, but.
All right. So we're about an hour-ish, a little bit over an hour. Do you want to switch over to some questions?
Yeah.
Cool. All right, so we got a bunch of super chats that came in. First one, Derek McBrayer. Is it better to keep a supplemental lift in for 1 to 2 times weekly till it stops progressing, or change it slightly each time, such as a different height, block pulls for deadlift, lockout, etc.?
I'll give my answer, then you can kind of play off of it.
Sure.
There's a couple of different ways I like to do this. Supplemental being the secondary movement, movement after the main movement. I can see a progression of a movement, a supplemental exercise, possibly run from anywhere between 3 to 5 times for most people. Personally, I may switch it each week, but there's different reasons for that. And that goes back to what we were talking about originally. So if it's 3 to 5 times and you're training that movement pattern twice a week, you can run that over 3 weeks, Monday, 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 or you can go Monday, Thursday, Monday, Thursday, Monday, 5 consecutive times. I personally like the consecutive times better because I want to know if it's helping sooner. I don't want to have to wait 5 weeks or 3 weeks to be able to know. And because a lot of the times I don't know if what I'm asking that person to do that for is just because they're weaker at that movement pattern, or they just suck at that movement pattern. If they suck at that movement pattern and we're not doing the movement pattern but once a week, they're probably going to always suck at that movement pattern.
Right.
So that's the answer for that. Either way, I would think over, now I'm assuming intermediate to beginner, and over 5 is probably too long. That's, unless they really, really, really suck at it. And it takes longer for them to build that. But then I don't know if I would put that high on the hierarchy of exercises for them to do. I'd put it a little bit lower to where the repetitions could be higher.
Right.
And go from there.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think if you're talking about a supplemental exercise, you're talking about something that builds up your main movement, right? So if you have a supplemental exercise in there and you run it, like Dave said, like 5 training sessions over the course of like 3 weeks, and you're noticing nothing is changing, it's like, okay, well then maybe that wasn't the supplemental exercise to pick.
And you need to progress the movement. So I don't want to make assumptions. You need to progress the movement. There's several different ways you can do that. You can progress it on, well, some ways I would not progress it if it's supplemental. I wouldn't progress it on time of tension.
Yeah, right.
I wouldn't go from like a 3 board to a 2 board to 1 unless that's what was programmed to be able to do. Then I would keep the range of motion the same so you can progress on it.
Yeah.
You want to get stronger at that movement for what it is. So you want to try to increase the reps. You want to try to increase the weight. Maybe you want to, if you don't want to do that, you want to increase maybe band tension, or you want to increase chain. You want to progress. You want to have some type of progressive overload with that movement. That's probably going to be more specific to load.
Yeah.
When we get lower in the hierarchy, you can progress on some of the other variables, with that, or even a max effort exercise. And this is a weird conversation now. The max effort exercises, I would say if you wanted to keep that the same, you probably want to progress on on everything except the load.
Right.
So if it's a reverse band blue one week, it's a reverse band green the next week, a reverse or whatever that's going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, again, coming back to the fact that, okay, if you're utilizing this exercise to get better at something, if you're utilizing this exercise to get better at your main lift or whatnot, and if you're newer, right, if you haven't been training for a terribly long time, you can get away with progressing on the same exercise for a longer period of time because your skill set gets better, right?
Yeah, just make it more compound.
Right. So if you're getting to the point where after 3 to 5 weeks, you're still progressing, it's like, okay, well, kind of keep going.
That's a good point.
So
with that, though, let's go with a close grip.
Yeah.
I would say just go with the close grip bench press, full range, keep progressing as long as you can progress.
Yep.
Then that would have more specificity than like a 2 board.
Right.
I don't see a point in using a 2 board for extended periods of time.
Absolutely.
Even though you'll get stronger at it, but you're restricting at that lower level, you're restricting some of the potential benefit of that movement pattern by using the restricted range for a longer period of time. So that's why I said make sure it's compound.
Yeah.
Like close grip bench press, barbell rows, just good heavy compound movements. Resist the urge to cheat to
Right.
get the next week.
Yep.
You know, if it's going to burn out over weeks, then let it burn out the same way you started. Don't start with the flat back, feet up, and then end up, you know, arching, heaving, and bouncing on the end.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a good point there. Next one, Andrew Presnell. Any tips for training while working an overnight shift?
I'm not the person to answer that, but I'm trying to. We addressed this in,
With Chad.
yeah, with the Chad podcast. And we had somebody else on a podcast that was Doug Heath, when he was working as a fireman. So the reason I say, I mean, I can give you general answers for that, but I've personally never worked thirds.
Yeah, right.
To be able to know, because your sleep and all that, there's a lot of other variables that are coming into there. Review those and kind of go from there, or reach out to people who are training for the same things that you are, that have already gone down that road that you have.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to speak about something that I haven't personally,
No, I agree.
done.
Same boat. I've never had to do that. I mean, I've trained having not slept, but that's not working the night shift.
And that's not an extended period of time.
Exactly.
Either. Now, years ago, I used to work seconds, and that was a different type of thing. And that's an easier answer for me, because it was just working or training before, basically as close to work as I possibly could.
Right.
You know, so enough to train, get home, eat, and then go to work. So pushing it back, that way I had the longer period to rest.
Yeah. Next one from Nobody 850. I've been trained by a known powerlifter for about 19 months with not much improvements. I am not that strong when I started with him. Is this my limit? No.
No,
Absolutely not.
I think you kind of answered your own question there.
Yeah, I think they were just looking for validation on that one. Yeah, absolutely not. The training, something's not working, right? It sounds to me like you're a fairly newer lifter. It's like if you're not improving over 19 months.
That's way too, I mean, you should, if you're a newer lifter, you should be improving on a quarterly basis.
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, I would have been throwing up red flags. Not saying that I don't know who he's talking about. I don't want to know who he's talking about.
Yeah, right.
And I'm not assuming that person's bad. You know, so the communication could be bad. But what I'm assuming is if you're a newer lifter and you're not making progress in 3 months, and you are accountable to your own self, then you need to move on to somebody else.
That's a long time of no progress.
Yes, which I'm going to flip back on him and say, why did you wait 19 months?
That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot. Yeah, that's a good point there. Next question from our buddy Helmet. How do you manipulate the conjugate method for beginners like John's son you currently train so that they learn proper and perfect technique for the big 3 lifts? That's assuming that you're utilizing conjugate principles to train John's son and that you're training John's son.
Well, you know, okay. I'm not training John's son, so let's just keep that in perspective. But I'm going to answer the question in a couple different ways.
Sure.
I know John's family. I know John's wife. You know, so I'll do anything for them. If he wants to come out to work out, or if he wants to come out to learn a movement, I'm going to teach him the movement. What you guys didn't see on that channel was the hour preceding where I'm talking to him about how training doesn't need to be part of life, how it shouldn't be part of this life. Is this what he actually wants to do? What does he want to train for?
Yep.
Where's the mobility? There's a lot of things going on there. So what you're seeing is what could, you know, work to help his family's channel, you know, on YouTube. So if he never comes back to train again, I'm 100% for that.
Right.
As long as he's
absolutely.
doing what he wants to do. He wants to come back, that's it. So at no point in time was this, he's going to take over the realm and we're going to follow this kid's progress, you know, on a YouTube. Just fuck that, man. We ain't going to, that's his, you know, he's going to do whatever he wants to do, and he's going to have a strong support system for whatever he wants to do. So filming that whole thing became a last minute idea, which I don't think was a bad idea, but it was a last minute idea that wasn't even part of the equation for the 2 weeks leading up to the whole thing.
Right.
So, and he was out again, you know, since then, and deadlifted or something like that, but that wasn't what that is. So push that aside. We have a high school kid that's out here and that we are helping, and there's a lot of variables to this thing, which is not associated with him.
Yep.
And it's just, there's variables I'd rather not go into that, but we have to work around a sport schedule that he has, which is creating some
Interesting.
very interesting dynamics on how he's trained.
Yeah.
Where going back to the very beginning of the podcast of being more auto-regulated, looking at the broad scope, what's going on. It is literally a week by week, day to day process to where technique is first and foremost. And he's pretty damn good with the technique because I bet there's been 1,000 squat reps, over the past 6 weeks or whatever it is, to where just this last week, we actually started to we began actually the FU thing still got my brain all fucked up, but we were able to begin to really work on a rooting mechanism for him, instead of just focusing on keep the feet flat, right? To actually that takes a long time before you can really get into that deep of the weeds when it comes to technique. And the reason we're able to do that is because technique is the first most important thing. And then getting him to buy into technique being the first and most important thing, which wasn't that difficult because it put 50 pounds on his squat within the first couple of weeks.
Absolutely.
So is it conjugate? Kinda. It's what he needs, right? So if you want to call conjugate what he needs, then that's what it is. He doesn't have a designated speed day or a max effort day. They're all technique days.
Absolutely.
Where we're manipulating the load based upon load and volume based upon what his sport is. And then we're playing with the accessories in a broad scope, like a broad paintbrush, where the accessories that we're selecting are not what I would call isolation movements. He's going to master how to do a glute ham raise. He's going to master how to do a stiff leg deadlift, how to do a barbell row.
Yeah, you're still keeping them relatively compound movements.
Very compound, because these movements are the building blocks for the movements to come. If he can do a barbell row effectively, braced well, tight, he's going to be able to do a dumbbell row that way.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And he's going to be able to do other movement patterns that way. So we're looking at the movement patterns. We are avoiding some, which we probably need to do a better job with. We are avoiding some, but in building those, because he's younger, he's going to get better at them for a long time. It's just exactly what we just talked about.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, we're probably going to go with a close grip bench press, full range motions before we're going to start going too much to the other, but we're going to throw the other in for fun.
Right, you got to keep it interesting for him because he is a kid at the end.
It's a kid, right? So put on the slingshot. Yeah, do this.
And you can let him do a variation of what we're doing, where he feels like he's part of the crew, and you can feel like, we all did the same thing today. We're all, which is massive.
Yes, and you put him with the other people that are in here that are about his same strength. They're a little stronger, and that drives him.
Yep.
And then they build a relationship, to where they're texting each other like, you're going to make it today, you're going to not make it today. Because there's that variability of that too.
Yeah, that's big. And another thing that they didn't see with that video with John's son is the hour prior of where you were just making him move his body, right? Like tumbling and just being able to work on those patterns of movement. It's like you're not looking to isolate, you're looking to integrate, right? You're trying to teach them how they can move their own body. We were trying to describe proprioception to him, which was kind of fun. But the idea of trying to explain to somebody who has no idea what they're talking about is like I was just throwing a ball at him. I'm like, how do you know where to put your hand to catch this? I don't know. I just do. It's like your body is using all of its systems to try to figure out where to put your hand so you can catch it. That's the same idea of what we're trying to do with the squat, with a deadlift, with a bench, or whatever those things may be for him. But I thought that was really cool to see and watch. Is like you had him tumbling, you had him doing all this stuff.
Well, my biggest the only goal I had when he wanted to come out, they said that he wanted to squat or do some of the lifts. That's fine. that was all secondary to me. He plays football. He wants to play baseball. My goal was I want to teach this kid how to fall.
Yep.
Okay, because I don't want him to get hurt. So let me back up. What can I do in this time period that's going to be the most beneficial to keep this kid from getting hurt?
Yep.
You know, and have the most productive season.
Right.
So the rolling, you know, the somersaults and all that other stuff was a progression to teach him how to fall.
Yep.
And never teaching a kid or him, you know, never teaching him how to fall. You just don't say, hey, stand in, you know, 2-point stance and fall.
Right.
You know, you can't do it because you don't know what they're going to do. So you start with a somersault. You start with a kneeling somersault. You start with a split stance somersault. You start with a fall somersault. And then boom, 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 it's coming along. And now when he goes, I'm confident, you know, he's going to know how to fall, right? Which I don't know if he was ever taught that before. I'm sure he has. John coached him. I'm sure that was part of the warm-up.
Yeah.
But I'm not assuming anything when they come out. You know, nope, not going to assume that, not going to assume that. Starting with the blank slate, can you fall? That's the first thing I'm going to have any young athlete test.
Yeah.
Everything else is meaningless. If they don't know how to absorb force and if they don't know how to fall, they're fucked.
Yeah, right. Right. Next question, John DeWolf. How do you know you are progressing with Conjugate when the movements and sets and reps are changing as often as every session?
Don't change every session.
There you go.
Or let me put the caveat in there, or cycle back to them more frequently, right? So say max effort. You might have a group of 5 different things that you're going to bring back in that are going to kind of become testers, right? You got testers, builders. I don't want to explain all that, but just say you got 5 things. Usually those are going to be things that you like to do, going back to what I was talking about before. Bring them back in enough to be able to know if you're actually getting better at them. Because not only that, but there's specificity that plays into that. If you're doing a different max effort exercise and you're a beginner or intermediate, every week for a year, you're probably not going to progress that well. Now, if you're highly advanced and those movement patterns are just slightly different from one another, and you know how to do them all, it's different conversation.
Yeah.
But that's, I understand his question, but I know that he's probably changing things too much.
Yeah. It's one of those things where if you have to ask, you're probably changing it too much. I mean, you could also look at your supplemental work if you shouldn't be changing that every single session, especially if you're a newer lifter, your accessory work.
You get down lower in that funnel of the training day. Some of that stuff doesn't really need to change for a long period of time.
Right.
And when it gets to the point where you're more intermediate or more advanced and it is changing every week, well, then you're changing it just because you want to change it, because you don't want to get bored doing the same thing. But you're not really changing it because the movement pattern, the exercise is the same damn thing.
Yeah.
But the beginner doesn't know that. So they're not making those changes to a similar movement pattern.
Yep.
You know, and we'll change shit all the time. I mean, a fucking push down's a push down for the most part.
Absolutely.
You know, so I change that all the time. But if you're a beginner, I'm going to back up and say, no, start basic. Use the stupid straight bar, keep the elbows tight, and do a push down tricep extension and master how to get the full range of motion, how to flex. From there, you can branch out into the single arm, reverse grip, whatever bullshit you want to do.
Absolutely. Next one, Joey Forche asked on Instagram, but I need to contribute to the Fleshlight Ammonia Fund. My equipment order from you guys is getting delivered tomorrow. I need a max effort lower body workout to make my soul die for this. To set the energy. What's
the equipment?
I imagine he's getting, I don't know. We can find out.
Fuck it, low box squats.
There you go.
Like low box squats. Close stance, low box squats with the safety squat bar. Use like a 12 or 14 inch box, close stance. There you go.
Beautiful. We got a couple extra super chats that came in from John Kleemeyer, and Fister Pistols is back.
Yes,
no questions. Just little comments. You have to live it. And then Fister Pistols said, "Oh, hello there." So we'll keep rolling here.
That's to you.
Yeah, it's to me. Thank you, Fister Pistols. Justin Fowler asks, super heavy knee wraps in 2.5 meters coming back soon.
I believe so.
Yeah.
I think that's one of them that's caught up in our supply chain issues that everybody has. But I do think those are on the way, for whatever that means.
Yep. Okay. Super chat from CW in regards to your FU rant. Amazing revelation, Dave. Thank you for sharing. Here we go. Next one, we got question from Shayla. Thanks always for the great info, guys. Thank you, Shayla. That's awesome. I know her. She's great. Brett Carter asks, have the parameters to be an elite Oreo eater changed over the years with the introduction of Oreo thins and mega stuffs? Thanks for always helping us out at Omaha Barbell.
That's a funny one, Brett, because when Noah came out to film for John's channel, he wanted to do some other videos. He's like, we need to do these awful eating videos. I'm like, I'm not sure that's really good for the Mountain Dog channel, but I did think I need to go look to see what those classification systems are for the Oreo challenge, because I forgot. It's been so long. And this is a funny story though, because those that don't know, I wrote an article a long time ago. It was an Oreo challenge, and there was just some stupid shit on there that are related to how many Oreos you can eat next period of time and all this crap that goes along with it. But it's funnier than hell. I need to find it and repost it on the blog. But here's the funny part of that. I would always repost it like once a year, every year, just to get a pulse for the climate, and sometimes I post, this is fucking the greatest thing in the world. Other years I post like, I can't believe you're posting this stuff. This is the most terrible thing in the world. I can't believe you're giving everybody diabetes. This shouldn't be coming from a fitness company. Yeah, you're personally
giving everybody
I'm like,
diabetes.
You're fucking serious here? Then I post it, 2 years later, because now I'm scared to post it because I don't want to get ripped off, ripped up again.
Yeah, right.
For that. Then I post it again, and then some eating challenge people did it and just killed whatever the time was.
Sure.
Right? And then I posted it. It keeps going back and forth like that. I think the last time I posted it, it got ripped apart. But at that point in time in my life, I don't give a fuck anymore. I just posted just for that reason. But yeah, I need to look into that. So it's,
there's definitely a lot of different variations.
Well, it's the second time it's crossed my mind in a month, which this is like a clue.
Yeah, you gotta get that going again. Next one from Mike Adamczyk. Thoughts on the vertical diet? Have you ever done it, or have you ever have much insight on it?
No, I've never done it. I have some insight on it. I purchased the book. Or when it was an ebook, and kind of look through it. When it comes to diets and stuff like that, I don't have thoughts one way or another.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit different in that realm. I guess I can kind of fall back and say, well, part of my degree was in nutrition, but I'm not a nutrition expert for any standpoint. But in strength sports, it's most of the time the athlete is going to be in a calorie surplus. And if they're in a calorie surplus, most of the time they're going to be hitting all their nutritional needs. So most of the time, I don't even have to have this conversation.
Right.
The only time I have to have the conversation is if recovery is being hampered, and I think it's because of that. Then the first place the conversation goes is to sleep and hydration.
Right.
The first place. The other time I have to have the conversation if somebody's just getting too fucking fat. Right? And then that conversation, before it goes to this diet, this diet, this diet, this diet, this diet, is what the fuck are you eating now? And then what changes can be made just to make it a healthier diet. Right? This is the real world that I live in, right? I'm not peaking people for shows.
You're trying to get them to stop eating the egg rolls from the dollar store.
Yeah, right. Or eat less and then replace them with foods that are healthier foods, which I do believe everybody knows the difference between what's good, healthy food and what's bad food when it comes to their diet.
Right.
They really do.
Yeah.
So it's just, I'm not going to go to that in the world I live in to go to those people and say, oh, no, you need to do the vertical diet. You need to do this diet. You need to do that. I was like, fuck that. No, you're fucking this up. So let's just make this little change that you can actually do.
Yeah.
And let's just peck away from there. And if they peck away from there, they can usually get where they need to be.
Right.
Then if it gets to a point to where that needs to be at a higher level than just advice, then yes, I have several people I can say you should probably look up this person's stuff, and that it's more broad range.
Yep.
I don't personally want to send anybody to a specific diet. Even if I think it's a good diet or not a good diet, I don't want to pigeon-toe somebody that doesn't have a decent understanding of dietary practices to somebody that's got the plan.
Yeah.
I want them to look to people who are experts in the field of nutrition and learn the basics of nutrition so they can learn how to navigate it for the rest of their life.
Absolutely.
So there's nothing against that. You know, I know a lot of people that love it, live it, and live by it.
Yep.
That's great. I don't know that much about it to nitpick on all the details about it. You know, Stan's an intelligent person. He's a motivating person. And if, you know, that's what the people like, great. But I've not found myself in a situation that I've had to send anybody to any specific diet.
Right.
At all. Like Jenny Craig, any of the fucking things. Weight Watchers, no, here's this. Tell me what you're eating. Holy fuck.
Half the cake. You only need half the
Yeah,
cake.
like holy fuck. I mean, every meal is a fucking disaster. So let's just work on cleaning one of them up.
Right.
Right? And you'd be surprised at how fucking hard that is.
Yeah.
So you imagine if it's hard for me to get somebody to take one fucking meal that they're having fast food, McDonald's fucking #1 for a lunch, and just say, get the regular chicken sandwich.
Yep.
Still get the fries in it, but just fucking, and that's not even a good fucking exchange.
Right.
But at least it's a cognitive change to be able
It's
to
an
move
effort.
someplace else. And you can't get them to fucking do that.
Yeah.
You think they're going to do the vertical diet?
Yeah.
Okay, so now just take your whole life, blow it up, and just start over here. Go to the grocery store, fucking spend a half hour, 2 hours trying to find everything you need.
Yeah.
Right?
No, that's not a reasonable expectation there. Next question from Coolin Flanagan. Is Conjugate method an optimal program for golfers, or should I be more sport specific?
That's a weird question.
Yep.
You know, yes. Should you be more sport specific? Yes. Can Conjugate be sport specific? Yes. So, I mean, that's it's not a good question.
Yeah, like that's under the assumption that like Conjugate is bands, chains, board presses, box squats, right? Like it's
Yes.
Yeah, no, you can absolutely make a Conjugate program great for golfers. You can make a Conjugate program great for people who play chess. You can make it.
Well, I think where the confusion comes in is every athlete, minus a very small percentage who are already there, will become a better athlete just by getting stronger. But that's under the assumption that they're already very weak for the sport they participate in.
Right.
So if everybody on the field or everybody on the course is stronger than this person is, and then they become a little bit stronger than they are, then there should be a transfer. That's one tiny aspect of the transference that has to happen there. So when they think Conjugate, they think max effort dynamic.
Yes.
So they forget all these other things, you know, so there has to be transference. What's the flexibility of the rotation? What's the swing? What are the things that really matter, right? Now, yes, getting stronger is going to make them better, but stronger at what?
Right.
Because getting stronger at, a deadlift versus getting stronger if they're very low on that scale at push-ups. Push-ups are probably going to help better because if they can't do a push-up, they also didn't see that with John's son, is the time spent showing him how to progress on push-ups.
Yep.
I wouldn't teach him the bench. He wanted to know, nope, can't bench, can't do push-ups the way I want to see him, can't bench.
Yes.
So there's that backtracking regression that goes there as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, and anytime you're working with a golfer, like you had said, there are so many other factors involved, right? Like, not to spin off in a different direction here, but golf is definitely more of a power elasticity sport, right? So there is a potential where if you get somebody really, really strong at bilateral lifts, you may make them worse at golf.
Oh, you will.
And you'll get them tighter. You'll get them in a worse position, right? So when you're talking, this is why coaches or sports coaches and strength coaches need to communicate, because you need to understand the needs analysis of the sport. You need to understand where that athlete is coming from, where they've been, what they've been doing, what their shortcomings on the field are, what the course or whatever, and to start to kind of break those down and work together and to have those conversations.
It's a fair assumption, because this is where the counter argument comes in, is the people working with younger kids, or beginners. Well, all my clients have excelled when they went back to their sport. Well, they didn't lift a fucking weight before they came to you.
Right.
So they got stronger. They were already under
Yep.
the other people that are on the field court, course, whatever it's going to be. You just brought them even to that. There's a point of transference, because in a way they're strong enough to do the sport.
Right.
With that, two-leg, you just said it.
Bilateral.
Yep. They're strong enough to do they're bilaterally strong enough to do the sport. Before they were under that level, you brought them to that level. That doesn't mean that's the end all for the sport. They were a deficit there for sure, but they're also a deficit in a lot of other things.
Yeah.
You brought that deficit up. Now you want to take that deficit here, but not address these other things. The transference is going to drop.
Yeah, it's just not going to be there.
Yes.
All right. Next one from Jeffrey Garcia. 2 weeks out from testing a new bench PR. How much should I go for, like 5 or 10% more of my current max? Thanks for the awesome content.
Break your
break the record
by the least amount you can possibly break it. That way you did it, right? So the key thing is to break your record.
Yep.
So now I'm not telling you to use fractional plates, so 5 pounds, right? So 5 pounds, break it by 5 pounds, knock that out.
Yep.
It's probably under the expectation that you want to have, but take that first. It's the low hanging fruit. And then whatever you do after that, go after that.
Yep.
But you got to take the 5 pounds.
Yeah, you got to get it.
Yes.
You got to get that first one. All right, Derek McBriar says, after supplemental exercise runs its course, are you hitting an indicator and then reassessing the next movement choice?
Me, I'm reassessing every single time I see the person lift.
Right.
So that's going back to open closed systems. Having a vastly open system, you're going to see everything, and that supplemental exercise is probably going to change every single week.
Right.
Because of other things that we spoke about earlier. Not being the case, I forget the question now. It's the accessories?
After a supplemental exercise runs its course, are you hitting an indicator and then reassessing the next movement choice?
Yes, I would reassess based upon where you are at that said time. So at that said time, what's breaking down on your max effort lifts and what seems to look a little out of sorts on your dynamic lifts. So what technically is happening on both of those lifts, what is kind of shining through as this looks a little weird. And then if it looks a little weird, it's either because of a neural connection, they don't know how to hold that muscle group statically long enough, or they don't have the mind muscle connection to even flex the body part, said lats,
right.
Effective, or they don't have the mobility to get the shoulders into position to flex the lats. So what's weird? And then let's fix what's weird. And just how do you fix what's weird? Assume it's activation.
Yeah.
So the first thing you're going to throw in there is going to be an easier exercise to do. It's not going to be heavy loaded. It's just going to activate. I would even probably say, depending upon the build and structure of the person, assume it's joint mobility, not being able to flex the muscle first. Then the activation. And then that would be the first couple times that you do it. Then if you notice that the max effort lifts and the main lifts are cleaned up, you can reassess, put something else in there. If they're not really cleaned up, but the positioning's a little bit better, then it's a muscular thing. Then you need to find a supplemental exercise you can load a little bit heavier, because you've already ruled out it's not activation and it's not the ability to hold the static contraction. Say a squat. You got to hold the lats in a certain position for X amount of time.
Right.
Can't do that. And that changes with the weight, the load that goes up. That doesn't mean you do heavy max effort holds for that time. It's a time thing.
Right.
So you got to, what's the easiest thing to fix? Let's get them to be able, can they hold that contraction for 10 seconds with a light weight? Fuck, no, they can't. Okay, bet if they can,
Yeah, right.
then you go there. So with A more open system, like we talked about, you can address that every single time they come into the gym and go that way. More closed system, I think every few weeks you assess, and then you look at what's been the common technical is usually the best place to look. Technical fault in those lifts. And if it's not the technical fault, you might see that you're running into a little transfer mid-lift.
Yeah.
You know, so then it's going to be more of a strength thing that's through there, that some of the people listening might have that, you know, where if you see like 2 gears in a lift, then you got to figure out what's going on with those 2 gears.
Where is that
and then
coming
what
from?
can you put in there to be able to see, because that most likely isn't going to be activation because you're moving.
Right.
It's not a static thing. It's just a transference thing. So then how do you go about looking into what that is? And I can keep going forever.
No, that was actually the last super chat that we had.
Cool.
What do you think? Wrap it up?
Yeah.
Cool. All right, guys. Thank you very much for checking out this episode. As always, like, share, comment, do all the things. I'll be putting the timestamps in this after this. Dave, if you have anything else, we can sign it off.
Follow the podcast, right? So listen to the podcast, because there's been 1 or 2 episodes that we have not been
Live.
on YouTube,
You're right.
on YouTube. So, and the frequency that we're going to be on YouTube is based upon the likes and views. And to be honest, they haven't been that good. So it doesn't make sense.
I mean, we get a lot of downloads on the podcast.
Yeah, so it doesn't make
comparison.
sense to do every single one of these live, you know, when it's so much easier just to rip it out through the podcast. So there are other episodes that are on the podcast, and moving forward, it could kind of be 50-50. I'm not too sure how we're going to move forward with all this, but you know, as you asked them, the likes matter.
Oh,
you know,
yeah,
the all
absolutely.
that stuff matters. I know that the likes don't really help with monetization, but that's what I kind of look at. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, if this has got 6,000 people listening and there's like 200 likes, well, obviously,
We
like
missed.
a whole fucking lot of these people didn't
missed
like
it.
this.
We
you
missed
know,
the target.
which is probably a false assumption, but. So there are episodes. My point is there are episodes that are there, and if you don't see us here, there's a good chance, because we're trying to knock these out once a week. So there's
Yeah.
a good chance they're over there.
Yeah, so Spotify, Apple Podcasts, pretty much anywhere podcasts exist, you'll find us.
And I think he's going to put them in the description as well.
Yep, absolutely. Also, last super chat that just came in, Brian Watkins, nice $20 super chat. Appreciate all the content. Thank you very much, Brian. And for everybody else watching, thank you all for joining us here, and we will see you guys in the next one.
Yep.